They laughed at the CEO's son. But what happened in that room? It shut everyone up. Welcome back to Mr. Austen Love and Story Tales, where life's most powerful lessons come wrapped in unforgettable tales. Before we begin, I need you to do something real quick. Please, like this video, comment chosen, and subscribe. Not just for me, but because stories like this, they need to reach someone who's sitting alone tonight, wondering if they'll ever be chosen. Now, have you ever been mocked for something you couldn't change? Your body, your voice, your background? Have you ever stood in a room, feeling smaller than you actually are? Let me take you to Manhattan, New York, the Grand Regent Ballroom. Crystal chandeliers, black tie gowns, polished marble floors. The kind of room where power shakes hands with power. A charity gala for Miller Enterprises. Cameras flashed. Investors laughed loudly. Waiters moved carefully between silk dresses and pressed tuxedos. And near the center of it all stood a tall man in a perfectly tailored midnight suit. Damian Miller. Confident posture, controlled breathing, calm eyes. But if you looked closely, just for a second, you'd see something flicker there, a memory. Across the room, a heavier-built man with slicked-back hair and a drink in his hand squinted. He tilted his head. "Wait! Hold up!" the man said loudly, nudging the investor beside him. "No way!" The laughter near him quieted just a little. He stepped forward, shoes clicking against marble. He looked Damian up and down slowly, and then he laughed. Not a polite laugh, not a confused laugh, a sharp one. "Yo, this is wild," he said, shaking his head. You're that fat kid from Monroe High, aren't you?" A few guests blinked. Someone chuckled nervously. Damian didn't move. The man stepped closer. "Dalton, right? Or, wait," he snapped his fingers. "Damian. Yeah. The CEO's chubby little son who couldn't run a mile without wheezing." A woman covered her mouth. A glass clinked somewhere in the distance. "And now look at you," the man continued, circling slightly, all cleaned up. "Guess money really does fix everything, huh?" There it was. Tyler Brooks. Older, broader, louder. But the same eyes, the same cruel smirk. Flashbulbs popped. A few guests whispered. Some looked confused. They didn't know the history. But Tyler did, and he was enjoying this. "You remember gym class?" Tyler said, grinning. "Man, we used to bet on how long you'd last before quitting." A couple of investors shifted uncomfortably. Damian inhaled slowly. In through the nose, out through the mouth. His jaw tightened just slightly. Tyler leaned closer. "Tell me something," he said. "You still hide in bathrooms when things get tough." The room grew quieter. Even the string quartet near the stage faltered for half a beat. Damian's fingers flexed at his sides. Not shaking. Controlled. Measured. But inside? A hallway locker. Laughter. Red cheeks. Swallowing humiliation because fighting back felt impossible. Tyler clapped him lightly on the shoulder. A little too hard. "Relax," he said loudly to the room. "We go way back, don't we, buddy?" The word hung there. Buddy. Damian lifted his eyes. And for the first time, he spoke. His voice wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. "Good to see you, Tyler." Calm, even. Tyler blinked. Maybe he expected anger. Maybe he expected shame. Instead, he got composure. But that wasn't enough for him. "You know," Tyler said, turning to the small crowd forming, "it's crazy what people become. High school's a trip, huh?" A few forced laughs followed. Someone whispered, "Is that really him?" Damian felt it. The weight of eyes. The echo of an old nickname he hadn't heard in a decade. Fat, slow, weak. He swallowed. Just once. And that's when the ballroom doors opened. Soft at first, almost unnoticed. But the sound of heels against marble carried. Steady, unhurried. And Tyler's grin began to fade. The heels didn't rush. They didn't hesitate either. Just steady. A soft rhythm cutting through tension. Some people turned first out of curiosity, then more followed. Tyler glanced over his shoulder, mildly annoyed at the interruption. And then he saw her. Rosine Porter, midnight blue gown, natural curls cascading over one shoulder, skin glowing under the chandelier light. Not loud, not flashy. Just undeniable. The room shifted. You could feel it. Tyler straightened slightly, smoothing his jacket. His tone changed instantly. "Well, hello," he muttered under his breath. But she didn't look at him. Not once. Her eyes were locked somewhere else. On Damien. And if you were watching closely, really watching, you'd see something pass between them. Recognition. History. Unspoken memory. Damien's breathing changed. Barely noticeable. But it changed. Tyler stepped aside casually, trying to recover control of the moment. "Do you two know each other?" he asked, forcing a grin. "Because I was just telling everyone about high school. Good times." Rosine stopped walking. 3 feet away from Damien, close enough to feel his warmth. But she still hadn't acknowledged Tyler. She studied Damien's face. Not the tailored suit. Not the polished image. His face. Her voice, when it came, wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. "Are you okay?" she asked softly. The question wasn't for the room. It was for him. And something in Damien's chest tightened. He nodded once. "I'm fine." She tilted her head slightly. She knew that tone. It was the same one he used when he pretended hallway insults didn't hurt. Tyler chuckled awkwardly. "Oh, come on," he said to the surrounding guests. "Don't tell me you're taking this seriously. We were kids. He survived." Rosine finally turned her head, slowly, and looked at Tyler. Not angry, not dramatic, just steady, measured. "You laughed at him," she said. The room went still again. Tyler shrugged. "It was high school, and you're still laughing." That hit. A few guests exchanged glances. Tyler forced another grin. "I'm just having fun." Rosine's jaw tightened, just slightly. Then, she did something simple. Something quiet. She stepped forward. Past Tyler. Past the tension. And stood directly beside Damien. Close enough that their shoulders brushed. Then, without breaking eye contact with Tyler, she reached for Damien's hand. Not dramatic. Not rushed. Just intentional. Her fingers slipped into his. Firm. Certain. The contact startled him for half a breath. He looked down, then back at her, and in that pause, that tiny suspended second, the room felt like it was holding air. "I chose him then," she said calmly. Her voice wavered. Just a little, but she didn't stop. "I choose him now. No music, no applause. Just silence. Real silence." A camera flashed. Someone whispered, "Wait, what?" Tyler blinked. "What does that even mean?" he asked, trying to laugh it off. Rosine finally looked fully at Damien. Not the CEO, not the host. "Just Damien. You don't have to prove anything," she said softly. He swallowed, harder this time. "Rosine." His voice almost broke on her name. She squeezed his hand. "I remember who you were," she continued. "And I remember who stood alone in that hallway while everyone else laughed." A faint tremor entered her voice. "But I also remember the boy who stayed kind," Tyler scoffed. "This is ridiculous." Rosine's eyes flicked back to him. "You measured strength by who you could embarrass," she said quietly. "I measured it by who kept showing up anyway." That landed heavier than any insult. A murmur moved through the investors now. A shift in posture. A recalibration. Damien inhaled again. But this time, it wasn't to steady humiliation. It was to steady something else. Emotion. 10 years. 10 years of transformation. 10 years of rebuilding. 10 years of wondering if the girl who defended him would ever see him again. And here she was, choosing him, publicly, Without hesitation, Tyler glanced around and realized something. The room wasn't laughing anymore. They were watching him, judging, evaluating. And suddenly, he wasn't in control. He cleared his throat. "Well, this is awkward," he muttered. Damien finally spoke again. Not loud, not aggressive, but firm. "I appreciate the memories," he said evenly. "But tonight isn't about high school." He turned slightly toward the crowd. "It's about growth, a subtle shift, a quiet reclaiming." Rosine didn't let go of his hand, not once. And that said more than any speech could. You see, have you ever had someone defend you when you couldn't defend yourself? Have you ever lost them and wondered if you'd ever be enough? What if the person who saw your lowest moment was the one who believed in your highest one? Stay with me, because this didn't start in Manhattan. It started in a hallway in Chicago, 10 years earlier. But before we go there, I need you to do something for me. If you've ever felt overlooked, mocked, dismissed, comment chosen, like this video, subscribe, because someone out there needs to hear that being laughed at is not the end of your story. Sometimes it's the beginning. Hard cut. 10 years earlier, Monroe High School, Chicago, Illinois. They laughed at the CEO's son in a ballroom filled with million-dollar smiles. They tried to shrink him back into a teenage memory. But here's the part that matters. Have you ever been reduced to who you used to be? Not who you fought to become, not who you worked to be, just who they decided you were. Maybe it was your weight, maybe it was your skin, maybe it was your family's bank account, maybe it was the way you walked into a room, already apologizing for existing. And maybe, just maybe, you're still carrying that hallway with you. Because here's the truth, nobody says out loud. Bullying doesn't end when graduation does. It lingers. In posture, in hesitation, in the way someone laughs too quickly at their own expense, in the way a grown man inhales slowly before answering a simple question. Tyler thought he was exposing an old version of Damien. But what he didn't understand was this. The boy he mocked built the company hosting that gala. The fat kid owned the building. The man standing quietly in that tailored suit signed the contracts that determined who stayed wealthy and who didn't. But here's where it gets deeper. Power didn't silence the past. Love did. Rosine didn't step forward because he was successful. She stepped forward because she remembered. She remembered the hallway, the locker, the boy who pretended not to cry. She remembered choosing him when there was nothing to gain. And she chose him again when there was everything to gain. So let me ask you something real. What if the person who defended you at your lowest disappeared before you could tell them what they meant to you? What if you spent years rebuilding yourself, only to meet them again when the stakes were higher and the wounds were still tender? And what if the same person who once humiliated you came back into your life when you finally had the power to destroy him? Would you take revenge, or would you prove you outgrew him? Stay with me, because this isn't just about a reunion. It's about restraint. It's about identity. It's about being chosen when you feel unworthy. And it begins in a crowded hallway at Monroe High School in Chicago. Winter air creeping through metal doors, lockers slamming, teenage cruelty disguised as humor, and one girl who decided, enough. Let's go back. 10 years earlier, Monroe High School, Chicago, Illinois. 10 years earlier, Monroe High School, Chicago, Illinois. The hallway smelled like wet coats and cheap cafeteria pizza. January in Chicago did that. Boots stomped in slush. Lockers slammed like gunshots. Voices bounced off the tile. Damian Miller stood at locker 314. Shoulders rounded, head slightly lowered. He had learned that posture reduced attention, made him smaller, less noticeable. It rarely worked. He struggled with the combination lock. His fingers were stiff from the cold. "Come on," he muttered under his breath. The metal door finally popped open. A math book slipped from his arms and hit the floor. A couple of sophomores snickered as they passed. He bent quickly, cheeks warming. "Careful," someone said behind him. "Wouldn't want gravity working overtime." Laughter, low at first, then louder. Damien froze. He didn't need to turn around. He knew that voice. Tyler Brooks, varsity linebacker, loud, broad shoulders, the kind of confidence that filled space without permission. Well, Tyler said, stepping closer. "If it isn't Monroe's favorite charity case." Damien picked up his book and slid it into the locker carefully. "Morning, Tyler. Keep it short. Keep it calm. Don't react." Tyler leaned against the locker beside him, blocking his exit. "Morning?" Tyler repeated. "Man, you sound like you're answering attendance." Two of Tyler's friends hovered nearby. One nudged the other. "Ask him if he finished his breakfast yet." More laughter. Damien shut the locker gently. He tried stepping to the right. Tyler moved with him, like a shadow. "Why are you always in a rush?" Tyler asked. "We're just talking." A freshman squeezed between them nervously and hurried away. Damien swallowed. "I have class." "Ooh," Tyler said dramatically. "Big business to handle." One of the guys chimed in, "Maybe he's late for lunch." The group burst into louder laughter. Damien's ears rang. He felt heat rising from his collar to his face. He stared at the floor tiles. "Count the squares. 1, 2, 3. Tyler leaned closer. "You ever think about trying out for something?" he asked. "Like competitive eating?" More laughter. Damien forced a small smile. "Not really." Tyler's grin faded slightly. He hated indifference. He wanted reaction. "You don't get tired of being the joke?" Tyler pressed. A locker door slammed somewhere down the hall. Damien shrugged lightly. "It's high school." Tyler's jaw tightened. That calm tone again. That refusal to give him the explosion he wanted. "You think that makes you mature?" Tyler asked. Damien didn't answer. He stepped sideways again. Tyler blocked him again, this time closer, chest almost touching. "You know what's crazy?" Tyler continued, voice lowering. "Your dad owns half this city, but you walk around like you're scared of it." A quiet reaction flickered across Damien's face. There it was. The mention of his father, the CEO, the legacy. Tyler saw it and smiled. "You probably got a driver waiting outside, huh?" he said. "Bet he carries your gym bag too." Damien inhaled slowly. In through his nose, out through his mouth. "Move, Tyler." The hallway quieted slightly. The shift in tone was subtle, but it was there. Tyler raised an eyebrow. "What was that?" "I said, move." Not louder, just firmer. Tyler leaned back slightly, studied him, then laughed. "Oh, he's got bass in his voice today." One of the guys slapped Tyler's shoulder. "Careful, bro. He might sit on you." A couple of students across the hall paused to watch. Phones started to lift discreetly. Damien noticed. That made it worse. Always worse when there was an audience. Tyler stepped closer again. "So tell me something," he said. "When you look in the mirror, do you see your dad's empire?" He poked Damien's chest lightly. "Or just you?" The poke wasn't hard, but it lingered. Damien's breathing faltered for half a second. He steadied it. He refused to look up. Tyler's smile faded again. That quiet, that composure, it irritated him more than anger would have. "Say something," Tyler pushed. Damien finally lifted his eyes. Blue, clear, controlled. "I don't owe you conversation." The words landed. Small, but sharp. Tyler's face hardened. "Oh, okay," he muttered. A beat of silence. Then, "Maybe you owe me entertainment," and the hallway shifted. Tyler didn't laugh this time. He stepped forward suddenly, too close. His shoulder hit Damien's chest. Not enough to knock him down, enough to test him. Damien stumbled back half a step. The crowd tightened. Someone whispered, "Oh." Tyler tilted his head. You gonna fall over? He asked. Damien steadied himself. Stop. It wasn't loud. But it wasn't passive either. Tyler shoved him again, harder. Damien's back hit the lockers with a loud metallic clang. The sound echoed. A few students gasped. No teacher in sight. Typical. Tyler leaned in. Look at you, he muttered. All that money and you still can't stand straight. Damien's hands clenched at his sides. He hated that his body reacted before his mind could stop it. Heart racing. Breath shallow. Vision narrowing. Tyler grabbed the strap of Damien's backpack. Let's see what the rich kid's carrying today. He yanked. The bag slipped off Damien's shoulder and hit the ground. Books spilled. Papers scattered. A pencil rolled across the tile. Laughter erupted. Not everyone, but enough. Damien dropped to his knees quickly. He hated kneeling. Hated how it looked. Hated how it felt. He began gathering his papers, hands slightly shaking now. Tyler crouched in front of him, mock sympathy on his face. Need help? He asked softly. Damien didn't respond. Tyler picked up one of the papers, looked at it. Advanced Placement Business Law. He read aloud, trying to be daddy already. More laughter. He crumpled the page and dropped it back down. Damien's jaw tightened. Give it back, he said quietly. Tyler leaned closer. What are you gonna do? The hallway felt smaller, air thinner. Someone near the lockers whispered, This isn't funny. But nobody stepped in. Tyler grabbed Damien's collar suddenly, pulled him halfway up. You think you're better than everyone? Tyler asked. Damien's breath caught. I never said that. You don't have to. Tyler shoved him again. Harder. Damien lost balance this time. He hit the floor fully. A sharp sound from his elbow. Pain shot up his arm. He bit it back. No reaction. No sound. That was the rule. Never give them the sound they're waiting for. Tyler stood over him. Stay down, he muttered. But Damien pushed himself up anyway. Slow, controlled. That annoyed Tyler more than anything else. Why don't you fight back? Tyler demanded. Damien looked up. Because if I swing, I lose. Because if I yell, I lose. Because if I cry, he didn't say any of that. Instead, he said quietly, I'm not fighting you. Tyler laughed sharply. That's because you can't. He shoved him again. This time, toward the lockers. Damien caught himself. Barely. His breathing was uneven now. A quiet crack forming inside. Not visible yet. But there. The bell hadn't rung. Time felt suspended. Tyler stepped forward one more time, raised his fist. Not fully committed, but enough to threaten. Maybe you just need motivation, he said. And for a split second, Damien wondered if this was the day it would go further. If this was the moment something permanent would happen. His throat tightened. His hands trembled. He didn't want to cry. Not here, not again. Tyler, one of the guys muttered nervously. Chill. But Tyler wasn't done. He stepped closer, and the hallway held its breath. Tyler's fist hovered in the air, not fully drawn back, not fully committed, just enough to threaten. Damien's back pressed into cold metal. His elbow throbbed from the fall. His breathing had shortened, shallow pulls of air that barely filled his chest. The hallway felt smaller now, quieter. Students watched, some pretending not to, some pretending to scroll, nobody stepping forward. Tyler leaned closer. You know what your problem is? He said quietly. You think staying quiet makes you strong. Damien's throat tightened. He didn't answer. Tyler's fist tightened slightly. And then... The word wasn't loud, but it cut cleanly through the air. Tyler's arm paused mid-motion. A few heads turned. Damien blinked. He knew that voice. Rosine Porter stood near the end of the hallway. Math textbook pressed against her chest. Dark curls pulled into a low ponytail. Her shoulders weren't squared the way Tyler's were. They weren't broad, but they were steady. She walked forward, one step, then another, each footfall deliberate. Tyler glanced over his shoulder. "Oh, look," he muttered. The hero showed up. Rosine didn't react to that. She kept walking, past the lockers, past the staring eyes, until she stood just behind Tyler, close enough to hear his breathing. "Move," she said. Her voice was calm, but there was a tremor under it. Small, barely there. Damien heard it. Tyler turned fully now. "You serious?" he asked. Rosine lifted her chin slightly. "Yes." A pause. Tyler looked amused. "This isn't your business." She stepped closer. "It became my business when you decided to make it public." A quiet murmur moved through the students. Tyler laughed softly. "You, defending him now?" Rosine glanced at Damien. He was standing upright again, trying to look unaffected, trying too hard. Her jaw tightened. "I'm defending basic decency," she replied. Tyler smirked. "Since when do you care about him?" That question hung heavier than the others. Rosine swallowed. Because she had noticed him long before this moment. Noticed the way he helped a freshman pick up dropped books. Noticed the way he never retaliated. Noticed the way he laughed at himself before anyone else could. But she didn't say that. Instead, she stepped forward, placing herself between Tyler and Damien, not aggressively, just firmly. Tyler blinked. "You serious right now?" he repeated. "Yes," she said again. Her hands were at her sides, but they weren't relaxed. Her fingers curled slightly inward, a nervous tell. Damien noticed. Tyler scoffed. "Move, Rosine." "No." The hallway tightened again. Someone whispered, "This is about to get worse." Tyler leaned down slightly, so they were eye level. "You think I won't push you too?" Rosine's breathing shifted. Inhale, exhale. Her voice softened, but didn't retreat. "Then do it." A faint reaction passed through the crowd. Tyler hesitated, just for half a second. Because pushing Damien was easy. Pushing Rosine, different. Not because she was weak, but because it changed the optics. He straightened, rolled his shoulders. "You really like hanging around losers?" he asked. Rosine's eyes flashed. "That word says more about you than it does about him." That landed. Tyler's smile thinned. "Why are you even talking?" Rosine answered immediately. "Because he won't." Damien's chest tightened at that. He didn't want her in this. Didn't want her absorbing impact meant for him. "Rosine," he muttered quietly. "It's fine." She didn't look back at him. "It's not." 2 words. Soft, but unmovable. Tyler exhaled sharply through his nose. "This is stupid." He stepped sideways, attempting to regain dominance without escalating further. But Rosine stayed where she was, blocking him. "You done?" she asked. Tyler stared at her for a moment, measuring, calculating. Then he laughed. A short, irritated sound. "Whatever," he muttered. "Keep babysitting." He glanced at Damien one last time. "This isn't over." And then he stepped back, not fully retreating, but enough. The tension didn't vanish. It thinned, just slightly. Tyler motioned to his friends. "Let's go." They lingered for a second, disappointed it hadn't exploded further. Then they followed him down the hallway. Their footsteps faded. The crowd dissolved quickly. Phones lowered. Lockers resumed slamming. Life returned to its usual volume. But something had shifted. Rosine stayed where she was, still between Damien and the direction Tyler had gone. Her breathing was uneven now. The tremor that had been hidden earlier was visible in her fingers. Damien noticed. He stepped forward slightly. "You didn't have to." "Yes, I did," she interrupted softly. Now she turned to look at him, and the firmness in her posture softened. Her eyes searched his face. "Are you okay?" He nodded automatically. "Yeah." She tilted her head. A quiet pause. "You're bleeding." He blinked, looked down. A thin scrape along his elbow from when he hit the floor. He hadn't even registered it. "Oh," he murmured. "It's nothing." She studied him for another second, and in that look, he felt seen. Not as a punchline, not as a last name, just him. The bell rang, shrill, abrupt. Students rushed past them. The hallway filled again. But for a moment, it felt quieter than before. The rush of students pulled around them like a current. Rosine stepped closer to the lockers, lowered her voice. "You shouldn't let him talk to you like that." Damien gave a small, almost humorless smile. "Kind of hard to stop him." She frowned slightly. "You don't even try." There was no accusation in it, just confusion. Damien leaned back against the locker again, but not slouched this time. Just resting. He looked at the floor, then at the ceiling, anywhere but directly at her. "I've tried," he said quietly. A pause. "When?" He hesitated. Freshman year, when he snapped once, and Tyler shoved him into a trash can. When he reported it, and nothing changed. When he asked his father to transfer schools and was told, "You need to toughen up," he swallowed. "Doesn't matter." Rosine crossed her arms lightly. "It does." He finally looked at her, and for a split second, the mask slipped. Not fully, just enough. His eyes weren't watery. He wasn't crying, but there was something there. Something tired. "You ever get tired of being watched?" he asked suddenly. She blinked. "What?" "Not admired," he clarified. "Watched. Like people are waiting for you to mess up." Her expression shifted. He continued. "I walk into a room and they see my dad. Or they see this." He gestured vaguely at himself. A small, embarrassed motion. "And it's like they're waiting for proof that I don't belong." His voice grew thinner toward the end, almost breaking. He caught it quickly. Cleared his throat. "Sorry, don't," she said softly. He shook his head. "I don't fight back, because if I lose control once, that's all they'll remember." A quiet breath left him. "And if I win, then I'm the rich kid who thinks he's better than everyone." He gave a faint, uneven laugh. "Either way, I lose." Rosine's shoulders lowered. The anger she had carried moments ago softened into something else. Understanding. She stepped closer, not invading, just near enough to make sure he felt it. "You're not weak," she said. He looked away again. "Doesn't feel like that." Silence stretched between them, but not uncomfortable, just heavy. He hated that she saw him like this, not because she would judge him, but because it made him aware of how much he'd been holding in. He pressed his thumb lightly against his palm. A grounding habit. "You don't have to pretend around me," she added quietly. That almost undid him. Almost. He nodded once, slowly. "Thanks." The hallway had mostly cleared now, just the echo of distant lockers and fading footsteps. He bent to pick up the last sheet of paper he had missed earlier. It was wrinkled. He smoothed it carefully against his thigh. Small movements, controlled, but inside, something had cracked. Not loudly, not dramatically, just a thin fracture running beneath the surface, because humiliation wasn't new. But being defended, that was, and that made it harder to ignore how much it hurt. Rosine adjusted the strap of her bag. "You coming?" she asked. He nodded again. They started walking toward class, side by side, not touching, but close. A few students glanced at them, whispered quietly. He noticed. Of course, he noticed. But this time, the whispers didn't land the same way, because someone had stood still when everyone else stepped back. And that mattered. It mattered more than he wanted to admit. Let me pause right here. If you've ever been cornered like that, if you've ever laughed something off just to survive the moment, if you've ever told yourself it didn't hurt, when it absolutely did, I want you to type 2 words in the comments. I survived. Because survival isn't loud. Sometimes it's just standing back up. Sometimes it's keeping your voice steady when your chest is shaking. And sometimes it's letting someone stand beside you. The hallway incident didn't disappear. It lingered. Not loudly, but quietly, in glances, in whispers that cut off when Damien walked past. By third period, the story had already travelled. Not accurately, not fairly, just distorted. Damien sat in the back of AP Business Law, elbow resting carefully on the desk to avoid the scrape from earlier. He kept his eyes on the board, but he could feel it. The looks. A couple of students behind him murmured. That was crazy. Tyler almost swung. Did you see Rosine step in? A soft chuckle. She didn't have to go that hard. Damien inhaled slowly. In through his nose, out through his mouth. Focus. The classroom door creaked open. Rosine stepped inside. A few heads turned immediately. She walked in like she always did. Not dramatic, not seeking attention. But today felt different. She noticed the glances too. She didn't lower her head. She didn't rush to her seat. Instead, she walked directly past Damien's desk, paused, then pulled the empty chair beside him slightly closer, and sat down. It wasn't her assigned seat. A couple of students blinked. One whispered, "Oh." Damien turned slightly. "You don't have to." "I know," she said quietly. Not sharp, just certain. He hesitated. "You're going to get dragged into it." She shrugged lightly. "I already am." There was no fear in her voice, just decision. The teacher, Mr. Halpern, glanced up from his laptop. "Miss Porter, that's not your usual seat." Rosine met his eyes. "I learn better here." A faint pause. Mr. Halpern studied the room briefly. He knew what had happened earlier. Teachers always know more than they admit, but instead of addressing it, he simply adjusted his glasses. "Fine, let's begin." Damien felt that small moment, that quiet permission. Rosine opened her notebook calmly, but under the desk, her fingers trembled slightly. She tucked them into her sleeve to steady them. She wasn't fearless. She was choosing not to retreat. Halfway through the class, a folded paper landed on Damien's desk. He stared at it, didn't touch it. Rosine saw it too. She picked it up before he could, unfolded it. 2 words written in thick black ink. "Stay down." Her jaw tightened. She didn't crumple it, didn't gasp. She simply stood, walked to the trash can, dropped it in, then returned to her seat. Mr. Halpern paused mid-sentence. "Everything all right?" "Yes," she replied evenly. Class resumed. Damien stared straight ahead, but his throat tightened. She didn't have to do that. Most people would have ignored it, pretended not to see. At lunch, things escalated again. The cafeteria buzzed with Friday energy. Trays clattering, soda machines hissing, laughter bouncing off tiled walls. Damien carried his tray toward the far corner table where he usually sat alone. He was used to the space, used to the quiet. But today, before he could sit, Tyler stepped into his path. Not aggressive, just deliberate. "You're trending," Tyler said lightly. Damien didn't respond. Tyler leaned closer. "You know what's funny?" he continued. "She's going to get tired of defending you." Damien kept walking. Tyler grabbed the edge of his tray, not flipping it, just holding it. "For real," Tyler added. "Girls like her don't stick around." A few students nearby slowed down, waiting. Damien's fingers tightened around the tray. "Let go." Tyler smirked. Or what? Before Damien could answer, Rosine appeared. She stepped between them again. Not behind him. Between. "You need a hobby," she said calmly. Tyler laughed softly. "You writing his lines now?" She didn't flinch. "If bothering someone is the highlight of your day, that says more about you than him." A few students nearby looked down at their trays. Tyler's smile faded. "You really think this makes you noble?" Rosine tilted her head slightly. "I think it makes me honest." Silence. Tyler looked at Damien, then back at Rosine, and something changed in his eyes. Not just irritation, something sharper, possessive pride dented. "You're embarrassing yourself," he muttered. Rosine stepped closer. "No," she replied quietly. "You are." That did it. Tyler released the tray. Hard, Milk sloshed slightly over the edge. He leaned in close to her. "You're gonna regret this." Her breathing shifted. Just slightly, but she didn't step back. "Maybe," she said. The cafeteria noise swelled again. Students resumed moving. Tyler backed away slowly. But as he walked off, he didn't look at Damien. He looked at Rosine. And that look? It wasn't playful anymore. It was personal. Damien noticed. And for the first time, fear didn't settle in his chest for himself. It settled for her. After lunch, word finally reached administration. Not because they cared, because too many students had recorded pieces of it. Phones have a way of forcing adults to notice. Damien was called into the assistant principal's office just before final period. Rosine insisted on going too. The office smelled faintly of coffee and copier ink. A small American flag stood in the corner. Assistant Principal Grant sat behind her desk, fingers steepled. "Have a seat," she said. Damien sat first, Rosine beside him. Tyler entered a moment later, hands in pockets, expression neutral. Grant sighed. "I've received reports of conflict." Conflict. The word felt diluted. Tyler shrugged lightly. "Just joking around." Grant looked at Damien. "Is that accurate?" Damien hesitated. The room felt smaller. If he said yes, it continued. If he said no, it escalated. Rosine spoke first. He shoved him into lockers. Grant raised an eyebrow. Tyler scoffed. "It wasn't like that." Grant turned back to Damien. "Did he shove you?" A long pause. Damien stared at the desk. He remembered his father's voice. "You don't complain. You handle things." He swallowed. "Yes." Grant nodded slowly. "And why do you think that happened?" The question startled him. "Why do you think that happened?" As if the answer mattered more than the action. Tyler leaned back casually. "He's sensitive." Grant tapped her pen lightly. "Tyler, you need to be mindful. Physical contact can be misinterpreted." Misinterpreted. Rosine's fingers curled slightly on her lap. "Misinterpreted," she repeated quietly. Grant glanced at her. "Miss Porter, we appreciate your concern, but we handle these matters carefully." Rosine inhaled sharply. "With respect," she said, voice steady but tight. "He keeps targeting him." Grant's expression shifted to something polite. "We'll monitor the situation." Monitor. That was it. No suspension, no real consequence. Tyler's mouth twitched upward almost imperceptibly. He had heard this before. He stood first. "Can I go now?" Grant nodded. "Let's keep things calm moving forward." Tyler left without looking at them. The door closed softly. Grant turned to Damien. "You're an intelligent young man," she said. "Don't let high school drama distract you." Drama. The word landed like dust. Rosine's jaw tightened again. Damien nodded automatically. "Yes, Ma'am." They left the office together. The hallway outside was nearly empty now. End of day quiet. Rosine stopped walking. "That's it?" she asked. He gave a faint shrug. "It's fine." "No, it's not." He looked at her. "You did what you could." She shook her head. "They're not going to stop him." He didn't answer. Because she was right. They resumed walking. Her steps were sharper now. Frustrated. "I don't get it," she muttered. "Why do they always wait for something worse to happen before they act?" He glanced at her. "You're shaking." She looked down at her hands. They were, just slightly. She exhaled. "I hate that they act like it's mutual." He hesitated. "It usually works that way." She stopped again. "No," she said firmly. "It works that way because people accept it." Her eyes locked onto his. "And you don't deserve that." The hallway lights hummed faintly overhead. He didn't know what to say, because part of him had accepted it, long ago. He looked down at his scraped elbow. The thin line had dried slightly. He pressed his thumb gently over it. "It's almost over," he said quietly. "2 more years." She stared at him. "You shouldn't have to survive school." He gave a faint, tired smile. "Everyone's surviving something." That silenced her. They stood there for a moment, not speaking, just breathing. And down the hallway, Tyler stood at the corner, watching, not approaching, just watching, his jaw tight, his pride bruised, his control disrupted, and the seed of something darker inside him deepened. By Monday, the hallway incident had evolved into something else, not louder, just wider. The cafeteria buzzed as usual, trays sliding across metal rails, soda fizzing into plastic cups, chairs scraping against tile. But now, when Damien walked in, conversations didn't stop. They shifted. That was worse. Rosine was already seated at a mid-level table, not the far corner anymore. Not front and center either. Somewhere in between. A deliberate choice. She looked up when he entered. Their eyes met. She gave a small nod. He felt it, that quiet signal. You're not alone. He carried his tray toward her. As he passed one table, a girl with glossy braids leaned toward her friend. Are they, like, together? Her friend shrugged. I don't know. It's weird though. Weird. The word drifted toward him. Another voice chimed in, softer but sharp. Her mom would never. A boy across from them muttered, his dad probably hates it. Damien kept walking. Each sentence landed differently, not heavy like Tyler's shoves, more subtle. Rosine heard it too. Of course she did. She didn't react outwardly, but her fork paused mid-air. Damien sat down, across from her, close enough that their trays almost touched. She leaned in slightly. Did you finish the business law outline? She asked casually. He blinked. Oh. Yeah. Her tone was intentional, normal, unbothered, as if nothing outside their table existed. I didn't understand the last section, she continued. The fiduciary duty part. He nodded slowly. It's basically legal responsibility to act in someone else's best interest. She tilted her head. So like loyalty? He hesitated. More like obligation. She smiled faintly. Still sounds close. Across the room, Tyler sat at his usual table. He wasn't loud today, wasn't cracking jokes. He was watching, not Damien. Rosine, a teammate, leaned toward him. You good? Tyler shrugged. Yeah, but his jaw tightened. Back at their table, a sophomore approached hesitantly. Hey, Rosine, she said awkwardly. You coming to practice later? Yeah, Rosine replied. The girl glanced at Damien, then back at Rosine. You, bringing him? The question hovered. Rosine didn't hesitate. If he wants. The girl forced a polite smile. Okay. She walked off. Damien looked down at his tray. I don't need to go, he said quietly. Rosine studied him. Why? He shrugged. Seems like your space. She leaned back slightly. Maybe I want it to be ours. That caught him off guard. Ours. She nodded once. You think I didn't notice? She asked. Notice what? She glanced briefly toward the whispering tables. That people act like this is unusual. He didn't answer. Because it was. Monroe High had invisible lines. Tables divided by background, by sports, by neighborhoods, by color. No one announced it. But everyone knew. You don't have to deal with that because of me, he said carefully. She exhaled softly. I'm not dealing with it because of you. A pause. I'm dealing with it because people are uncomfortable when someone chooses differently. He swallowed. And you're okay with that? She thought for a moment. I don't like it, she admitted. But I don't like injustice more. A quiet breath left him. Across the cafeteria, Tyler stood abruptly. His chair scraped loudly. Conversations dipped. He walked toward the exit. But as he passed their table, he didn't stop, didn't speak. He just let his shoulder brush slightly against Rosine's chair. Not enough to knock it. Enough to remind. She steadied herself, didn't turn around. Damien's fingers tightened around his fork. But he stayed seated, because reacting would give Tyler what he wanted. The door swung shut behind him. Rosine looked at Damien. You saw that, right? He nodded. He wants attention. He wants control, she corrected softly. The whispers continued around them, but something else was growing too. Curiosity. A few students watched, not with judgment, but interest, because standing against the invisible lines, that unsettled the usual order. Rosine took a sip of water, her hand steadier now. You ever notice, she said quietly, how people act like proximity is permission? He frowned slightly. What do you mean? They assume if I sit here, I must be making a statement. A faint smile touched her lips. Maybe I just like your company. He blinked. Heat rose to his face again. But not from shame this time, from something softer. Across the room, Tyler stopped at the door, looked back once, and the expression on his face, it wasn't casual anymore. It wasn't playful. It was calculating. After school, the temperature had dropped further. Chicago wind moved between buildings with sharp precision. Rosine waited near the front steps. Damien usually left through the side entrance. Less traffic, less attention. But today, she texted him. Front. He hesitated before walking that way. When he stepped outside, she was there. Hands tucked into her coat sleeves. Hair slightly loosened by the wind. You didn't have to wait, he said. I know. They started walking down the sidewalk together. Snow piled in grey mounds near the curb. Cars hissed past on wet pavement. For a while, neither spoke, just footsteps. Breath visible in the cold. Then, does it bother you? She asked quietly. What? The whispers. He considered it. Yeah, he admitted. She nodded. It bothers me too. He glanced at her. You don't show it. She let out a soft, humorless laugh. Because if I do, they win. They reached the corner crosswalk. The signal blinked red. They stopped. She looked straight ahead. My mom says people don't always know what to do with difference. He tilted his head. And, she says, that doesn't mean you shrink. A quiet pause. You're not shrinking, she added. He swallowed. Sometimes he felt like he was. In posture, in volume, in presence. The light changed. They crossed. Halfway across the street, he spoke again. Why did you really step in? She hesitated, wind catching her words for a second. Because you shouldn't have to handle everything alone. He looked down at the pavement. I'm used to it. That doesn't make it right. Her voice was softer now. More personal. I've watched you for a while, you know. He glanced at her quickly. Watched? She nodded slightly. You help people when no one's looking. A small, embarrassed reaction crossed his face. That's normal. It's rare, she replied. They reached the bus stop. The bench was cold. She brushed snow off before sitting. He stayed standing for a moment, then sat beside her. Close, but not touching. The city hummed around them. Cars, wind, distant sirens. You don't have to fix yourself to deserve respect, she said suddenly. The words hung in the cold air. He stared ahead. I'm not trying to fix myself. She looked at him carefully. Then what are you trying to do? He hesitated, a long one. Be less noticeable. That answer landed heavier than the wind. She turned toward him fully now. That's not living. He gave a faint shrug. It's easier. Silence. Breath. A bus roared past without stopping. She leaned back slightly. Easy doesn't build confidence. He almost smiled. Since when are you a motivational speaker? She smiled softly. Since I got tired of watching you carry things you don't deserve. That nearly broke him again. Not loudly. Just internally, because no one had framed it like that before. Carry. He looked down at his hands. They were large, strong, but often held still. He inhaled slowly. You're going to make things harder for yourself, he murmured. She shrugged lightly. Maybe. A pause. But some things are worth it. He looked at her then. Really looked. Not as the girl who intervened. Not as the one attracting whispers. Just Rosine. And for the first time since freshman year, the tightness in his chest loosened. Just slightly. A small crack of warmth in the cold. The bus finally arrived. Doors folding open with a hydraulic sigh. She stood. He stood too. As she stepped onto the bus, she turned back. "See you tomorrow." He nodded. "Yeah." The doors began to close. Then she added softly, "You're not alone." The bus pulled away. He stood there for a moment longer, wind brushing against his coat. The street quieter now. And down the block, across the road, Tyler stood beside his car, watching, hands in pockets, eyes narrow, not amused, not casual. Something had shifted inside him, and it wasn't fading. 2 weeks after the bus stop conversation, Rosine stopped laughing as easily. It was subtle. Damien noticed because he had learned to notice small things. She still defended him, still sat beside him, still walked with him. But sometimes her mind drifted. One evening, she didn't text back. The next morning, she looked tired, not sleepy, worn. "Everything okay?" he asked quietly between classes. She nodded too quickly. "Yeah, just stuff." He didn't push. But later that week, she finally invited him over to study. Her house sat on the south side, brick worn at the edges, front steps slightly uneven. He hesitated before knocking. He wasn't used to homes like this. Not because he judged them, because he didn't want to look out of place. Rosine opened the door. "Hey," she said softly. The warmth inside was uneven. A space heater hummed near the couch. The living room lights were dim. "Sorry about the heat," she muttered. "It's acting up." He stepped inside carefully. There were medical bills stacked neatly on the coffee table, half hidden under a magazine. He didn't stare. But he saw. From the kitchen, a cough echoed, deep, persistent. "My mom," Rosine said quietly. "She's been dealing with some things." He nodded slowly. "How bad?" She looked down. "Insurance only covers so much." A pause. "And groceries don't wait." He felt something tighten in his chest. "Does the school know?" She let out a small, dry laugh. "They know we're managing." Managing. He understood that word now. It meant surviving without asking for help. She sat at the kitchen table, hands folded. "For the first time in my life," she whispered, "I'm not sure staying here is possible." He blinked. "What do you mean?" She hesitated. Then, "There's a job offer for my mom. Out of state." Silence. The heater clicked. His breath slowed. "How far?" She swallowed. "Far enough." The announcement came 3 days later. Not dramatic, not loud, just real. Her mom got the job. They were leaving in 2 weeks. The snow began falling heavier that week. Chicago winter didn't ease up for heartbreak. It intensified it. On her last day at Monroe High, the sky was gray and low. Students moved in clusters, unaware that something permanent was happening in the middle of their ordinary day. Damien stood by the front entrance, hands in his coat pockets, breath visible in the air. Rosine stepped outside slowly, backpack slung over one shoulder. Her eyes scanned the parking lot like she was memorizing it. "You really have to go?" he asked. It wasn't a logical question, but it slipped out. She nodded. "I don't have a choice." Snowflakes caught in her hair, melted quickly. They stood facing each other near the school doors. Students passed behind them, laughing, unaware. "I thought we'd have more time," he said quietly. "So did I." Her voice cracked slightly on the last word. She cleared her throat. The cold made everything sharper, more honest. "I'm sorry," she added. "For what?" "For not being able to stay." He shook his head immediately. "You don't owe me that." But something in his chest already felt hollow. The front doors opened again. Her mom's car idled near the curb, exhaust rising into the winter air. It was time, and neither of them moved. The engine idled, soft, persistent, like a clock. Rosine shifted her weight slightly. Her gloves were in her pocket, but she wasn't wearing them. Her fingers were red from the cold. Damien noticed. He always noticed. "You'll call, right?" he asked. Yeah, I mean, she hesitated. I'll try. The wind pushed between them. Not enough to separate them, just enough to remind them time was moving. I didn't think it would be like this, she said quietly. Like what? So sudden. He nodded. I was going to ask you something, he blurted. She looked up. What? He opened his mouth, then closed it. The words felt heavy now, out of place. He had planned to ask her to the spring formal. It felt foolish now. I thought maybe we'd... He stopped. Her eyes softened. I know. His throat tightened. She stepped closer. Not dramatic, just instinct. Their breath mingled in the cold air. I hate goodbyes, she whispered. Me too. Her hands trembled slightly now. From the cold, from everything else. He wanted to reach for them, but he didn't know if that was allowed. So he stayed still, and that stillness hurt more than the shove in the hallway ever had. The car horn beeped gently, not impatient, just reminding. Rosine inhaled slowly, then stepped fully into his space, close enough that he could see the faint moisture in her eyes. Damien, her voice wavered, just slightly. He waited, because if he spoke first, he might lose control of his own. She swallowed. Promise me something. He nodded immediately. Anything. Her fingers finally moved. They caught the edge of his coat sleeve, not gripping, just anchoring. Promise me you won't forget me. The words weren't dramatic. They were fragile, like glass. He blinked. Forget her. As if she hadn't altered the shape of his entire high school existence. I couldn't, he said quietly. I mean it, she pressed softly. Don't let this just be a chapter. His chest tightened. It won't. She searched his face, looking for doubt. There wasn't any. I promise, he added. Her breath left her slowly, like she had been holding it for days. She nodded once, but her hand didn't let go immediately. And that tiny delay said more than either of them were brave enough to. Her mother leaned across the passenger seat and pushed the door open wider. Rosine. Time. Rosine stepped back slowly. Her hand slipped from his sleeve. The absence of contact was immediate. Sharp, she opened the car door, paused, looked back. Snow collected lightly on the windshield, on the roof, on her shoulders. She gave him a small smile. Not forced, just brave. Don't shrink, she said softly. He tried to answer. His voice caught. She slid into the passenger seat. The door shut. A muffled thud. The engine revved slightly. The car pulled away from the curb. Slow at first, then gradually merging into traffic. Damien stood there, hands at his sides, breath shallow. He didn't wave. He couldn't. The car reached the intersection, turned left. The red taillights glowed faintly through the falling snow. Then, they were gone. Just grey sky, white pavement, silence. He exhaled, long, unsteady. Snow landed on his coat, melted, slowly. He swallowed hard. There was something he meant to say, something that had lived in his chest for months. He took one step forward, as if he could still catch up. The word slipped into the air. Alone, too late. He closed his eyes briefly, and whispered the rest, but no one heard it. The first winter in Boston felt different, still cold, still sharp, but quieter. Damien stood outside his dorm building near the Charles River, hands tucked deep into his coat. New city, new air, no Monroe High, no Tyler in the hallway, no Rosine at the bus stop. He had chosen Boston intentionally, far enough from Chicago to breathe, close enough to visit when required. His father approved. Good business school, he'd said over dinner. Strong connections. Connections. That word followed him everywhere. In lecture halls filled with legacy names. In group projects where students casually referenced family firms. Damien sat near the middle rows. Not hiding, not front and center either. Some habits lingered. The first time a professor asked him to introduce himself, he hesitated. Damien Miller. he said evenly. A few heads turned. Recognition. Miller Enterprises carried weight beyond Chicago. He saw it in their eyes. Expectation, assumption, privilege. He felt that old tightness in his chest again. Different hallway. Same pressure. But this time, no one shoved him. No one laughed. They measured him differently here. Curiosity instead of cruelty. Still heavy. Still isolating. He spent more time in the library than in dorm lounges. More time planning than socializing. At night, when campus quieted, he would sit at his desk and stare at his phone. Rosine's contact still saved. He never deleted it. He never dialed it either. He didn't know where she was. Didn't know if her number had changed. He would type a message sometimes. Then, erase it. I hope you're okay. Delete. I kept my promise. Delete. He exhaled slowly and closed the phone. Boston wasn't a fresh start. It was a continuation, just with more space to rebuild. The gym wasn't dramatic. It smelled like rubber mats and metal. Nothing cinematic, just effort. The first day he walked in, he nearly walked back out. Mirrors everywhere. Rows of lean bodies moving confidently. He stood near the entrance for a second too long, then forced himself forward. He started on the treadmill. Slow. 5 minutes in, his chest burned. 10 minutes in, his legs trembled. He wanted to stop. Actually, he did stop. Bent forward slightly, hands on knees, breathing heavy. A guy next to him glanced over briefly, not mocking, just noticing. Damien straightened, restarted the machine. That became the rhythm. Start, stop, restart. There was no instant transformation, no sudden confidence, just repetition. Morning alarms he didn't want to answer. Protein shakes that tasted like chalk. Soreness that made stairs difficult. He almost quit after the 3rd week. Sat on his dorm bed, staring at the floor. What am I even doing? He muttered. Was it for health? For confidence? Or for revenge? He didn't like that last possibility. He stood. Went anyway. Months passed. Gradually, his breathing steadied. His endurance improved. Clothes fit differently. Shoulders squared more naturally. But the most surprising change wasn't physical. It was internal. The first time someone asked him for workout advice, he blinked. Me. The guy nodded. Yeah, you're consistent. Consistent. Not impressive. Not dramatic. Just steady. He liked that. One evening, after finishing a late session, he caught his reflection in the locker room mirror. Not the body. The eyes. Still thoughtful. Still cautious. But no longer shrinking. He exhaled. Okay, he whispered to himself. Not perfect, but progressing. And somewhere beneath the muscle and discipline, the boy from Monroe High still existed. He didn't erase him. He built on top of him. The panic didn't disappear just because his body changed. It showed up differently. Quieter, but sharper. During sophomore year, it happened in the middle of a presentation, a simple case study. He stood at the front of the lecture hall, confident posture, prepared slides, and then his throat tightened, vision narrowed. He heard a laugh, not in the room, in his memory. Tyler's voice, gym class, lockers. His pulse spiked. He finished the presentation, barely, sat down, hands cold. That night, he booked an appointment. He didn't tell his father. He didn't tell anyone. The therapist's office in Cambridge was small, neutral, soft lighting, the kind of space that didn't demand anything from you. Dr. Klein leaned back in her chair. What brings you here? She asked gently. Damien hesitated. I don't like who I become when I feel cornered, he said slowly. Cornered? How? He stared at the carpet. Like I'm 16 again. Silence. Not uncomfortable. Just open. You were bullied, she said. He shrugged slightly. People call it that. And what do you call it? A pause. He swallowed. Humiliating. That word felt heavier than expected. Dr. Klein nodded. Your body learned to brace for impact. He frowned. "But I'm not there anymore." "No," she agreed softly. "But your nervous system doesn't know that." That stayed with him. For months they worked quietly, breathing techniques, reframing moments, separating past from present. One afternoon she asked, "What would you say to that 16-year-old version of yourself?" He didn't answer immediately. Then, "I'd tell him he's not weak." His voice cracked slightly. He cleared it. "I'd tell him surviving wasn't failure." Dr. Klein smiled faintly. "Maybe you're already doing that." He left the office that day lighter, not healed, not finished, but aware. Growth wasn't about becoming someone else. It was about integrating who he had been. By the time Damien graduated, Miller Enterprises was shifting. His father's health had begun to decline. Nothing catastrophic, just aging. Board meetings grew shorter, decisions slower. One evening in New York, seated across from his father in the corner office overlooking Manhattan, the conversation changed. "You're ready," his father said quietly. Damien blinked. "For what?" "For this." The skyline reflected in the glass behind them. "You've studied it, you've lived it. Now lead it." The transition wasn't ceremonial. It was strategic, gradual. Damien relocated to New York, took a modest apartment near Midtown instead of the penthouse his father offered. He wanted proximity, not insulation. The first board meeting he led was tense. Older executives measured him. Young investors watched closely. He didn't dominate the room. He listened, then spoke. Clear, concise, firm. "We streamline operations," he said. "Modernize infrastructure. Expand into digital sectors." A few eyebrows lifted. He wasn't playing safe. He wasn't reckless either. He restructured departments carefully. Cut unnecessary redundancies. Elevated younger talent. Rebalanced investments. The press labeled him methodical. He preferred steady. One afternoon, reviewing acquisition proposals, a name caught his eye. Brooks Consulting Group. He paused, scrolled further. Managing partner, Tyler Brooks. For a moment, the office felt smaller, older. His thumb hovered over the file. 10 years. He leaned back slowly. Exhaled. Of course. Tyler hadn't disappeared. He had rebranded. Damien closed the file, not rejecting it, not approving it, just setting it aside, because power offered something he never had before, choice. And this time, he wouldn't be cornered. The wind in Manhattan felt different from Chicago, sharper, faster. Rosine stood across the street from Miller Enterprises, clutching a Navy portfolio against her chest. The building rose above her, reflective glass catching the grey morning light. She swallowed. "Okay," she whispered to herself. This wasn't about ambition. It wasn't even about career growth. It was about medical bills, about late-night pharmacy receipts, about her mother's voice, trying to sound strong when it wasn't. She crossed the street carefully, heels clicking against concrete. Her coat collar turned up slightly against the wind. The revolving doors spun slowly as she stepped inside. Warm air greeted her. The lobby stretched wide, marble floors, polished chrome, tall ceilings. Conversations were quieter here, controlled, professional. She adjusted her grip on the portfolio. A receptionist behind the curved desk smiled politely. "Good morning." "Hi," Rosine replied, steady but soft. "I'm here for the 10 a.m. interview, personal assistant position." The receptionist glanced at the screen. "Name?" "Rosine Porter." A brief pause as fingers typed. Then, "Yes." "You're meeting with Mr. Miller." The name barely registered at first. Miller was common, corporate, generic. Her heart didn't react yet. "Take elevator bank B to the 42nd floor," the receptionist added. Rosine nodded. "Thank you." She stepped toward the elevators. Each step felt measured, her breathing steady but shallow. This mattered. The last few years hadn't been easy. Her mother's health had stabilized but remained fragile. They had moved twice. She had taken part-time jobs during college, skipped social events, carried more responsibility than most of her peers. This job wasn't luxury, it was relief. The elevator doors opened with a soft chime. She stepped inside, alone. Mirrored walls reflected her back at her. Professional blouse, minimal jewelry, natural curls framing her face. "You've handled worse," she murmured quietly. The doors closed. The ascent began, numbers lighting one by one. Her reflection looked back at her, older, stronger, but still carrying something in her eyes. A memory, a hallway, a boy who stood quiet while everyone else filled the space with noise. She exhaled slowly. 42. The elevator slowed. Her stomach tightened unexpectedly. Not fear. Something else. Anticipation without reason. The doors opened. She stepped out into a sleek corridor. Glass offices lining both sides. Assistants typing quietly. Phones ringing softly. A woman approached her. "Rosine?" "Yes. I'm Claire, executive assistant to Mr. Miller. He'll see you shortly." "Mr. Miller." There it was again. A flicker this time. "Miller." She brushed it aside. Coincidence. Claire gestured toward a waiting area near the corner office. "Please, have a seat." Rosine sat, portfolio resting on her lap. Her breathing slowed intentionally. Inhale, exhale. Across the hall, a tall silhouette moved behind tinted glass. She couldn't see his face clearly, just posture, confident, measured. Her pulse shifted slightly. Claire stood again. "He's ready." Rosine rose, smoothed her blouse once, and walked toward the office door. The door to the corner office was partially open. Claire knocked softly. "You're 10 o'clock, Mr. Miller." A calm voice answered from inside. "Send her in." Rosine stepped forward. The office was expansive, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Manhattan. A long conference table to the right, minimal decor, controlled, intentional. Behind the desk, a man stood facing the window, back turned, hands clasped loosely behind him. "Miss Porter," he said evenly, "thank you for coming." The voice was steady, lower than she remembered. Older. She couldn't place it. "Thank you for the opportunity, sir." He turned, slowly, and the world shifted. Her breath caught first, not loudly, just stopped. The man standing before her wasn't the boy from Monroe High. His shoulders were broader, his posture grounded, jaw sharper, eyes clearer. "But, Damien," she whispered. The words slipped out before she could stop it. He froze, just for a second, then recovered. Professional, controlled. "Miss Porter," he said calmly, "please, have a seat." Her heart hammered. She didn't move immediately. It couldn't be, but it was. Same eyes, same quiet intensity, just grown. "Damien Miller?" she said again, softer. A faint pause. "Yes." The room felt smaller. Her mind scrambled through years in seconds. The snow, the bus, the promise. He stepped forward slightly, maintaining distance. "You've changed," she breathed. A corner of his mouth lifted faintly. "So, have you?" Silence stretched. Not awkward, not comfortable either. Charged. Claire gently closed the door behind her, and the sound of it sealing shut felt final. Rosine finally sat down, hands clasped tightly in her lap. She was here for an interview, not a reunion. "Mr. Miller," she corrected herself quickly. He noticed, but didn't address it. Instead, he walked around the desk and took his seat. Composed, measured, but inside, his pulse had spiked the moment she said his name. He hadn't expected this. Not here, not like this. Her resume had caught his attention earlier that week. Rosine Porter. He had stared at the name longer than necessary, but he hadn't allowed himself to assume. New York was large, life complicated, but here she was, breathing, real. In his office, he folded his hands calmly. "Your resume is impressive," he began, professional tone intact. But beneath it, memory, loss, Unfinished words. Rosine nodded. Thank you. Her voice trembled slightly. She steadied it. The elevator ride replayed in her mind. The name, Miller. How had she not connected it? Because part of her hadn't let herself believe. Shall we begin? He asked. She inhaled. Yes, but neither of them had fully recovered from the recognition. Not yet. For a few seconds, neither of them spoke. The city hummed beyond the windows. Muted traffic, distant horns, life moving as if nothing monumental had just happened inside that office. Damien adjusted a file on his desk, not because it needed adjusting, because his hands needed something to do. Rosine's fingers were still intertwined in her lap. Tight. She released them slowly, forced them to rest flat against her portfolio. Professional. You're here for a job, not closure, not answers. He cleared his throat gently. So, Boston University, he began, glancing at her resume. Business administration. Her lips parted slightly before words formed. Yes. I graduated with honors. Her voice was steady now, almost. He nodded once. I see you managed multiple roles while completing your degree. She gave a small, controlled exhale. Yes, I had to. A subtle pause followed that sentence. He caught it. Had to. He remembered medical bills on a coffee table. A space heater, humming. He looked up. Their eyes met. For a split second, the corporate mask slipped, just slightly. Your mother? He asked quietly. She blinked. Surprised, he remembered. She's stable, she said softly. It's manageable, manageable. That word again. He nodded. Good. Silence returned, but not empty, layered. Rosine swallowed. You look different, she said, before she could stop herself. He leaned back slightly. Time does that. A faint hint of something warmer touched her expression. You were already different back then. He paused. Back then, the hallway, the bus stop, the promise. His pulse shifted. He kept his tone neutral. You've built an impressive work history, he said, redirecting gently. Administrative leadership, crisis coordination, high-pressure environments. She recognized the shift, accepted it. Yes, I work well under pressure. A breath. So I've learned. Another silence, longer this time. Not because of awkwardness, because they were both calculating. How much do we acknowledge? How much do we protect? He tapped the edge of her resume lightly. This role requires discretion, he said. Trust. Close proximity to executive decisions. Her eyes held his. I understand. He studied her face. Matured. Strength carved subtly into her features. But the same steadiness remained. The same refusal to shrink. He remembered her standing between him and Tyler. Hands trembling but unmoving. He inhaled slowly. The air felt heavier now. Rosine shifted slightly in her chair. Can I ask you something? She said quietly. His gaze sharpened just a bit. Yes. Did you know it was me? The question landed softly, direct. He didn't answer immediately, because the truth required precision. I recognized the name, he said evenly. Her breath caught again, just slightly, and he held her gaze. And I hoped. That word lingered. She looked down briefly, processing. He continued, more composed now. But I didn't assume. A faint nod. Neither of them smiled fully, because the space between them wasn't simple. It held 10 years. Unanswered calls, unsent messages. The room quieted again. But this time, the silence wasn't stunned. It was aware. Damien closed the folder gently. Decision already made, but he didn't rush it. Power had taught him patience. Miss Porter, he began formally. The title created distance again. Necessary distance. You're more than qualified. Her spine straightened instinctively. But, she asked softly. A faint hint of vulnerability returned. He shook his head. No, but. A small exhale left her. Relief mixed with disbelief. I'd like you to start Monday, he continued. If that works for you. Her eyes widened slightly. That's it? He allowed a subtle smile. Yes. You're not interviewing other candidates? I already have. She blinked. Oh. He leaned forward slightly. Eliminating noise is part of leadership. Her lips pressed together as she processed that. You're sure? She asked. The question wasn't about qualification. It was about history. He understood that. Yes. A longer pause settled between them. More personal now. I won't make this complicated, he added carefully. This is a professional role. You'll report directly to me. Her pulse visibly shifted at that. She nodded slowly. I can handle that. I know you can. That slipped out before he filtered it. They both noticed a faint crack in composure. She stood first. He stood too. The height difference felt different now, not intimidating, balanced. She extended her hand. Thank you. Mr. Miller, there was the line again. The boundary. He took her hand. Firm. Professional. But the contact lasted half a second longer than required. Not inappropriate. Just familiar. Welcome to Miller Enterprises, he said evenly. Her eyes searched his again, looking for something. He kept his expression controlled. But beneath it, relief, shock, unresolved longing. She stepped toward the door, hand resting briefly on the handle. Then she paused, turned, slightly. Damien. He looked up. Yes. Her voice softened. I'm glad you didn't forget. His chest tightened, but his face remained composed. Some promises, he replied quietly, aren't temporary. She held his gaze for one more suspended moment, then left the office. The door closed gently behind her. Damien stood still for several seconds. Manhattan spread behind him. He exhaled slowly. Of all the outcomes he had imagined, this one hadn't been structured. He walked back to his desk, opened the acquisition file he had set aside days earlier. Brooks Consulting Group. Tyler Brooks. Managing partner. He stared at the name, then leaned back in his chair. And for the first time since that snowy afternoon outside Monroe High, the past and present were no longer separate. They were converging. The first week passed carefully, not awkward, not entirely comfortable either, measured. Rosine's desk sat just outside Damien's office, close enough for frequent interaction, far enough to preserve structure. She adapted quickly. Calendar management, client coordination, board briefings. She worked with quiet efficiency. Damien noticed everything. The way she organized files alphabetically without being asked. The way she paused before entering his office. A small inhale, then composure. The way she never used his first name inside company walls. Mr. Miller, the 3 p.m. call has been moved to Thursday. Thank you. Professional. Controlled. But under it, current. One evening, most of the floor had emptied. Lights dimmed automatically in unused offices. The city outside shimmered in early dusk. Rosine remained at her desk, typing. Damien stepped out of his office. You can go home, he said quietly. She looked up. I know. A faint smile tugged at his mouth. You don't have to prove anything. Her eyes softened. I'm not. A pause. I just like finishing what I start. He leaned lightly against the doorframe. That hasn't changed. She tilted her head slightly. Neither has your habit of watching everything. He didn't deny it. Silence stretched between them. But this time, it felt less guarded, more curious. He stepped back into his office, then hesitated. Rosine, yes? Can you step in for a moment? Her heartbeat shifted slightly. But she stood and walked in. She closed the office door softly behind her. The room was quieter at this hour. No hallway chatter, no phones ringing, just the faint hum of climate control. Damien walked toward the window, hands in his pockets. Long week, he said casually. It's Tuesday, she replied. A soft laugh escaped him. She hadn't lost that timing. He turned toward her, and for a second, they just looked at each other. No agenda, no corporate framing, just recognition. She shifted her weight slightly. Is something wrong? No, he answered quickly, then softened his tone. No, nothing's wrong. Another pause. He noticed the faint line near her brow when she concentrated. She noticed the way his shoulders no longer curved inward like they had in high school. You're different, she murmured. He lifted an eyebrow. Good different. Yes. A breath. Stronger. He swallowed. I had to become... The words were quiet, almost unfinished. She stepped closer to the desk, not invading, just narrowing distance. You don't seem angry, she said. He exhaled slowly. I was. For a while. And now. Now I understand it wasn't about me. Her eyes searched his. That's not easy. No, he agreed softly. It wasn't. A longer silence settled. Charged. Fragile. She glanced briefly at his hand resting against the desk, then looked away. He noticed. Of course he noticed. The air felt heavier now. Not uncomfortable. Just honest. Why didn't you ever call? She asked suddenly. The question landed gently, but it carried weight. He didn't answer immediately, because the truth required vulnerability. I didn't know if you'd want me to, he admitted. Her breath caught. You promised. I know. Silence again. Not stunned, not distant. Close. Almost too close. The question lingered between them. Why didn't you call? Damien looked down briefly, then back at her. I drafted messages, he said quietly. Her eyebrows lifted slightly. You did? More than once. A faint, almost embarrassed breath escaped him. I just never sent them. Why? He stepped away from the desk, moved closer to the window, needed distance to think clearly. I thought, maybe you'd moved on, he said carefully. Maybe you didn't need reminders. Her voice softened. You don't get to decide that for me. That landed. He nodded once. You're right. Silence stretched again, but thinner now, more vulnerable. He turned back toward her. There was something in his eyes she hadn't seen before. Not in high school, not in the interview. Something unguarded. I've wanted to tell you something for a long time, he began. Her pulse quickened. What? He opened his mouth. The words rose, then stopped. Because confession changes everything. Because once spoken, there's no retreat. He looked at the floor briefly, exhaled. It's not appropriate, he finished instead. Her shoulders lowered slightly. Disappointment flickered. Because I work for you. Yes. A pause. And because I don't want to risk what we just found again. That honesty made her chest tighten. He stepped back, rebuilding distance. Professional. Controlled. But the air had shifted. They both felt it. Rosine didn't move toward the door. She stayed where she was. You're still protecting me, she said softly. He frowned slightly. From what? From feeling... The word hung between them. He inhaled slowly. You think... That's what this is. I think you've always carried things alone. That struck closer than he expected. He let out a quiet breath. I learned that early... From Tyler, she asked gently. His jaw tightened. From everyone. She stepped closer now. Not impulsively, deliberately. You don't have to do that here. Her voice trembled slightly at the end. He noticed. He always noticed. He ran a hand through his hair briefly. A tell he hadn't outgrown. I don't want to complicate your career, he said. You're not. Yes, I am. He took a step toward her. Close enough now that the space felt charged. If I say what I've been holding in for 10 years, he continued quietly, there's no version of this that stays simple. Her breathing grew uneven. Since when did we ever choose simple? That nearly undid him. He looked at her fully now. No titles, no walls, just Rosine, the girl who stood still in a hallway, the woman standing in front of him now. He inhaled deeply. Ready? And then... He hesitated again. Fear flickering briefly. What if she doesn't feel the same? What if this ruins everything? He almost stepped back, almost retreated, but something inside him, the version of himself who had learned not to shrink, refused. He closed the remaining distance, not touching, just close enough that silence felt intimate. "I tried," he said softly. Her brow furrowed. "Tried what?" "To move on." The words came slower now, measured. "I dated. I focused on work. I built this company into something stronger." His voice steadied. But there was always this space, a pause. She didn't interrupt, didn't rush him. He swallowed. "I told myself it was nostalgia, another breath. But it wasn't." Her hands trembled slightly at her sides. "Damien." He met her eyes fully. No retreat left. "I never stopped loving you." There it was, not loud, not dramatic, just true. The words didn't echo. They settled, heavy, real. Rosine's breath caught sharply. She blinked once, twice, as if steadying herself. Her composure cracked quietly, not with tears spilling dramatically, but with one slow inhale that didn't complete. She started. Her voice faltered. She covered her mouth briefly, trying to regain control. He stepped back half an inch instinctively. "I'm sorry," he murmured. "I shouldn't have—" "No," she shook her head. "No." Her eyes shimmered now, not from weakness, from relief. "You don't get to apologize for that." Her voice broke slightly. She exhaled, long, unsteady. "You think I forgot?" she whispered. He searched her face. "You think I didn't compare every person I dated to the boy who never fought back, but always stood back up?" His chest tightened. Tears gathered in her eyes now, but she didn't wipe them. "I waited too," she admitted softly. A tear finally slipped down her cheek. She didn't sob, didn't collapse. She just let it exist. The quiet break was more powerful than any outburst. He stepped forward gently, slow enough to give her space to retreat if she wanted. She didn't. His hands rested lightly on her arms, warm, careful. She leaned into him, not dramatically, just finally. 10 years of restraint loosened, and for a moment, the hallway, the snow, the mist whisper, all of it dissolved. Her voice was barely audible against his chest. "I never stopped either." He closed his eyes briefly and exhaled, not in relief, in recognition. The confession hadn't destroyed anything. It had completed something. 3 days after the confession, the office felt lighter, not obvious, just warmer, small touches. A coffee placed on her desk before she arrived. A brief glance held half a second longer than necessary. No public displays, no recklessness, just quiet alignment. And that's when it happened. Rosine was in the lower lobby cafe, reviewing a vendor contract. She hadn't told Damien she'd stepped out. She just needed air. A pause between meetings. She reached for her cup and froze. Across the cafe, near the window, Damien sat at a small table, leaning forward, relaxed, laughing, not polite laughter, not corporate, real. Across from him sat a woman with sharp features and dark shoulder-length hair, confident posture, elegant blazer. Rosine recognized her. Julia Moreno, marketing director, smart, charismatic, well-respected. Julia leaned closer as she spoke. Damien listened intently, smiling again. Rosine's chest tightened. It wasn't rational. It wasn't fair. But it was immediate. The warmth from earlier that week cooled quickly. Her mind didn't stay in the present. It traveled. Snow falling. Car driving away. The silence after. Abandonment doesn't need evidence. It needs memory. She watched Julia touch Damien's arm briefly while making a point. Professional, probably innocent, but Rosine's breath shortened anyway. Her stomach dropped. She looked down at her cup, then back up. He hadn't seen her. They were mid-conversation, comfortable, aligned. She swallowed. "You're overreacting." But the thought didn't soothe her, because she remembered something else, being left without control, without choice. She stood slowly, heart beating harder than it should, and walked out before they noticed her. By the time she returned to the 42nd floor, her breathing was uneven, not visibly, but internally. She sat at her desk, stared at her computer screen, didn't see the words. Her mind replayed the image. Julia smiling, Damien relaxed, connected. What if this is temporary for him? The thought slipped in quietly. What if I was just familiar, comfortable, convenient? Her throat tightened. She hated that this fear existed, after everything they had just confessed. But trauma doesn't ask permission. It reacts. She remembered packing boxes in Chicago, remembered promises that distance couldn't protect, remembered telling herself she wouldn't depend on anyone again. And yet, here she was, heart involved, hope exposed. Claire walked by. Everything okay? Rosine forced a nod. Yeah. Her voice sounded thinner than she intended. Inside, something whispered, "Don't assume you're the only one he's choosing." Her phone buzzed. A message from Damien. "Are you back upstairs?" She stared at the screen. Didn't answer immediately. Another message. "Need to review tomorrow's board deck." Professional tone. "Of course." She stood abruptly. "I'll be right back," she told Claire, and walked toward the elevator. Because she needed clarity, before insecurity rewrote everything. The elevator doors opened with a soft chime. Rosine stepped inside, pressed the lobby button. Her reflection stared back at her in the mirrored wall. Composed on the outside, unsettled underneath. The doors began to close, and a hand caught them. Damien stepped in, breath slightly elevated. "Hey," he said. She didn't answer immediately. The doors sealed shut. The descent began. He studied her profile. "You okay?" A pause. She kept her eyes forward. "I saw you downstairs." He blinked. "In the cafe?" "Yes." Another pause. "With Julia?" The name settled between them. He nodded slowly. "Okay." She finally turned toward him. "You looked comfortable." Her voice didn't accuse. It trembled slightly instead. He exhaled, understanding dawning quickly. "Rosine, I just need to know," she interrupted softly. "If I misunderstood something." The elevator hummed, numbers descending. His jaw tightened briefly, not in frustration, in care. "You didn't," he said quietly. Her shoulders stiffened slightly. "Then what was that?" He stepped closer, not crowding, just closing distance. A strategy discussion. She searched his face. "And the laughing?" A faint, almost tired smile touched his mouth. She made a terrible joke about quarterly projections. The elevator slowed, but neither of them moved toward the doors yet. Her eyes flickered with uncertainty. He saw it clearly now. This wasn't jealousy. It was fear. The elevator reached the lobby. Doors opened. Neither stepped out. Damien pressed the door close button gently. The doors sealed again. They remained suspended between floors. "Private. Look at me," he said softly. She hesitated, then did. "I don't laugh like that with someone I'm interested in," he said quietly. Her breath caught slightly. "Don't assume you know how you laugh." He nodded once. "Fair." A pause. Then he continued. "I laugh like that when I'm relaxed." Her eyes searched his. "And you're not relaxed with me?" He stepped closer again, careful, measured. "I've waited 10 years for you," he said. "Do you think I'd risk that over a marketing meeting?" Her throat tightened. He wasn't defensive. He was steady. "I don't want you guessing," he added softly. "If something makes you uneasy, say it." She swallowed. "I saw her touch your arm." He glanced down briefly. Emphasis during a point. "Still," he nodded again. "You're allowed to feel what you felt." The acknowledgement softened her slightly. "But don't rewrite us because of it." That landed gently. She exhaled. Long, unsteady. "I didn't like how fast my mind went," she admitted. "That's not weakness," he replied. "That's history." The elevator hummed softly around them. And history doesn't get to dictate this, he continued. We do. Silence followed. But it wasn't fragile anymore. It was thoughtful. Rosine leaned back lightly against the elevator wall, her breathing steadier now. I don't want to be the girl who assumes, she said quietly. You're not, he replied immediately. I also don't want to lose this. You won't. A small pause. Not because of something that small. She studied him carefully. You're sure? He stepped forward one final inch. Close enough to feel warmth. Rosine, he said softly, you're not competing with anyone. Her eyes shimmered slightly, but she didn't break. She nodded once. Trust doesn't erase fear instantly. It replaces it gradually. The elevator doors opened again. This time, they stepped out together, back into the lobby, back into public space, professional masks returning lightly. But something had strengthened. Later that afternoon, Damien called her into his office. Not tense, just focused. There's something else I need you to know, he said. She closed the door behind her. What? He slid a folder across the desk. Brooks Capital Investments. Her brow furrowed. Brooks? He held her gaze. Tyler Brooks. A quiet reaction flickered across her face. No. Yes. He's involved here? Mid-level investor, Damien confirmed calmly. Not operational, but financially tied. Her chest tightened. All this time? He wasn't directly connected when you started, Damien clarified. But he increased his stake last quarter. She processed that slowly. Does he know about us? Damien's jaw set subtly. I doubt it. A pause. But he will. Silence settled again. Different this time. Not romantic. Strategic. Complicated. Rosine exhaled. Does this change anything? Damien shook his head. No. Another pause. Unless we let it. Her eyes met his steadily. I'm not shrinking. A faint smile touched his face. I didn't think you would. Outside the glass walls of the office, Manhattan moved forward, unaware that old rivalries were about to intersect with new power. And somewhere in the city, Tyler Brooks believed he was just another investor. He had no idea. He was stepping back into a story he once tried to control. The ballroom at the Grand Regent shimmered under crystal chandeliers. Black tuxedos, silk gowns, champagne glasses clinking softly against polished marble floors. Miller Enterprises' annual charity gala had become one of Manhattan's most anticipated events, funding youth mentorship programs across Chicago and New York. Damien stood near the center of the room, composed in a tailored midnight suit, not hiding, not dominating. Present. Rosine stood a few steps away, radiant in deep navy, professional distance maintained. But their eyes met often, brief, grounded. The string quartet played softly near the stage. Investors circulated in small clusters, deals disguised as philanthropy, power disguised as generosity. Claire approached quietly. Brooks Capital confirmed attendance. Damien nodded once. Understood. His pulse didn't spike, not the way it once would have. He had faced harder rooms than this. Across the ballroom, the entrance doors opened. Tyler Brooks stepped in, confident stride, smirk already forming. He scanned the room as if it belonged to him. He hadn't noticed Damien yet. Tyler accepted a champagne flute from a passing server, laughed loudly at something one of his associates said. Then, his eyes landed on Damien. Recognition flickered, not full awareness, just memory. He stepped closer. A few investors followed casually. Wait, Tyler said, squinting slightly. I know you. Damien turned calmly. Good evening, Tyler. Tyler blinked, then laughed. Monroe, hi, he said loudly. No way. A couple of nearby guests paused. Tyler stepped closer. You cleaned up, he added. Didn't recognize you without the... He gestured vaguely at Damien's torso, a smirk spreading. Some guests shifted uncomfortably. Tyler leaned in slightly. Man, you remember gym class? You couldn't run a mile without... He laughed. A sharp, careless sound. Rosine felt her stomach tighten across the room. Damien didn't react, didn't flinch. Tyler continued, unaware of the shifting energy. Crazy where people end up, huh? He took a sip of champagne. Didn't think you'd be at events like this. The words hung in the air, and something subtle changed in the room, because several executives nearby were watching now, carefully. Tyler's laughter didn't echo the way he expected. It thinned, faded, because no one joined him. A few investors glanced at each other. One cleared his throat quietly. The quartet near the stage faltered slightly before correcting themselves. Tyler looked around, confused. You guys went to Monroe? Someone asked carefully. Damien didn't answer. He simply held Tyler's gaze. Calm, unshaken. That composure unsettled Tyler more than any reaction would have. What? Tyler scoffed lightly. We're just reminiscing. But the room had shifted. Several board members were now watching closely, not amused, not entertained, evaluating. Rosine stepped closer from across the ballroom, not interrupting, just present. The air felt heavier. Tyler's smile faltered slightly. He sensed it now. Something wasn't aligned, because in rooms like this, mockery only works if the power balance supports it, and the balance had quietly changed. Damien adjusted the cuff of his jacket lightly, unhurried, measured. You're right, he said evenly. High school was formative. Tyler forced a grin. Yeah? Built character? In a way. Damien took a slow breath, then glanced briefly toward the stage. A subtle signal. The master of ceremonies approached the microphone, tapped it gently. Ladies and gentlemen, he began, before dinner is served, we'd like to recognize the driving force behind tonight's initiatives. A spotlight shifted, softly, toward Damien. Tyler blinked. The host continued. Under his leadership, Miller Enterprises has expanded its youth mentorship partnerships by 40%. Murmurs rippled outward. Please join me in acknowledging our CEO, Damien Miller. Applause began, not explosive, but respectful, growing. Tyler's smile disappeared entirely. His grip tightened slightly around his champagne glass. He looked at Damien again, recalibrating. CEO, he muttered quietly. Damien met his eyes. Yes, no arrogance, no gloating, just fact. And in that moment, the hallway memory flipped. Public space, different outcome, same two people, but only one of them had grown. The applause softened. Conversations resumed in quieter tones. Tyler shifted his stance. Mask rebuilding. Well, he said with a strained chuckle. Small world. Damien nodded once. It is. Tyler cleared his throat. We should talk soon. About the merger. A few executives nearby exchanged subtle glances. Damien's gaze sharpened slightly. Yes, he replied calmly. Brooks Capital's pending expansion proposal. Tyler blinked. You've reviewed it? I've reviewed everything. A pause. Measured. Your liquidity projections depend on our decision next quarter. Tyler's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. That's standard. Of course. Damien agreed evenly. But without Miller Enterprises backing the integration, your timeline becomes complicated, not threatening, not smug, just factual. Tyler forced a thin smile. We're confident in our positioning. I'm sure you are. The words weren't cruel, but they were clear. For the first time since high school, Tyler wasn't the one dictating the outcome. He was waiting on it. And the man he once tried to shrink now held the pen. Rosine had been standing just behind the line of executives. Listening, watching, measuring. Tyler glanced at her now. Recognition dawning slowly. Rosine? He said, surprised. Her posture remained steady. Yes. He laughed lightly. You work here? She stepped forward, not hiding behind corporate distance anymore. I do. Tyler looked between them, understanding beginning to piece together. You two. Rosine didn't let him finish. She walked calmly to Damien's side, close enough that their shoulders nearly touched. Then she did something simple. She took his hand, not dramatic, not rushed, intentional, public. I chose him when there was nothing to gain, she said evenly. The room quieted again. And I choose him now. A faint tremor lived in her voice, but she didn't retreat. Tyler stared, speechless. This wasn't hallway territory. This wasn't locker room laughter. This was visibility, ownership, alignment. Damien's fingers tightened gently around hers. Not possessive, grateful. 10 years earlier, she had stood between him and humiliation. Tonight, she stood beside him in power. Tyler stood there, processing. Power had shifted, publicly, and for a brief moment, he looked smaller, not physically, internally. The easy confidence had cracked. "You're really running this?" he asked quietly. Damien nodded. "Yes," Tyler swallowed. The room wasn't laughing anymore. It was observing, waiting. This was the moment Damien could dismantle him. Reference the hallway, reference the shove, reference the laughter. He could return it all. Instead, Damien exhaled slowly. "We were kids," he said evenly. Tyler blinked. "That doesn't excuse it," Damien continued, "but it explains it." A faint murmur passed through nearby guests. Tyler's jaw tightened. "You're not going to humiliate you?" Damien finished softly. A pause. "No." Rosine watched him carefully. Damien met Tyler's eyes again. "I learned something from those years," he said. "Strength isn't loud. Silence." "If Brooks Capital meets the criteria," he added calmly, "we'll evaluate the merger fairly, not generous, not cruel. Professional. Final." Tyler nodded slowly. For once, without a smirk, the gala resumed around them, music returning, conversations reigniting. But something had settled. Damien turned slightly toward Tyler one last time. Not aggressive, not defensive, just clear. "The fat kid you laughed at," he said quietly, without raising his voice, "built the table you're standing at." No applause followed. No dramatic gasp, just understanding. Tyler looked down briefly, then back up. And for the first time, he didn't argue. He stepped back, not defeated, just aware. Rosine squeezed Damien's hand lightly. He glanced at her. A quiet exchange passed between them. No words needed. 10 years. A hallway. A promise. A confession. A choice. And growth. If you've ever been underestimated, if someone tried to define you by your lowest moment, remember this: you don't rise by shrinking others. You rise by becoming undeniable. If this story moved you, even a little, like this video, share it. Subscribe, and when life gives you the choice between revenge and love, choose love, always. End of story. Undeniable. If this story moved you, even a little, like this video, share it. Subscribe, and when life gives you the choice between revenge and love, choose love, always. End of story.
If you enjoy American Love Stories, please consider subscribing and comment what you need next. And love you all from Mr. Osteen.